Call to order the meeting of the Sewer Authority Midcoastside for Monday, February 10th, 2020, and ask for a roll call, please.
Director Reddick,
Here.
Director Lohman,
Here.
Director Decker,
Here?
Director Dye,
Here.
Director Penrose,
Here.
and Director Blanchard.
Here.
And let's welcome a new representative. Maybe
Thank you.
want to
Well,
introduce
I'd like
him?
to introduce Peter Decker, who's our new Montero representative. He's filling the vacancy left by Eric Marshall when Eric left. Peter's been here forever, as near as I can tell, a long-term Montero resident, and worked earlier on a lot of these former water organizations we had in Montero, even before Montero bought out the private company. So he's got tons of experience. He's now serving as our treasurer and was volunteered for that in the financial committee. So he just jumping right in since November.
Welcome.
Great.
Okay, well, we have public comment. We have one request from Tim Costello.
Should I stand up or should I just do it here?
Stand up.
Stand up so that you can be seen on the camera.
I'll go over here like everyone else has to do.
Yeah, there you go.
So what you have in front of you is something we're rolling out, kind of new. Kishan brought it up at the city council meeting the other day. We're gonna be having tours the third Wednesday of every month from 11 a.m. to noon. It's going to be open to the public, obviously. So please come down if you want to learn more about the sewage treatment plant or what we do here or how we interact with member agencies and everything. Just come on down, we'll take you on a tour, get a little general knowledge of what goes on around here and everything that happens. We'll try to keep the tours short. We'll
There's a
see
lot
how
to
that
see.
works out.
There's a lot to see.
There's a lot to see. There's a lot
They're
to see.
meaty.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyhow,
So
that's all I got.
I've enjoyed the tours I've had very much. So, great. Thank you. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Does anyone want to pull anything from the consent agenda? All right, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Second. All right, any further discussion?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, moving on to regular business. Authorize the general manager to replace vehicles for maintenance crew. Can we have a safe report?
Yeah, so we have two vehicles as a part of the maintenance crew which were purchased in 2005, and as you see from the pictures in the staff report, they are in a pretty bad condition, exposed to highly corrosive atmosphere and not very safe to be driving it. And therefore, we have put up a proposal to replace these two vehicles, and staff is here to answer any questions.
One little question. Is it possible to leverage these vehicles in the 4th of July parade, which has the rusty truck and rusty tractor contents? I could like maybe win a prize and get some money back.
Yeah.
Also, I know that you are in the process of building some structures to contain some equipment to protect it from the weather. Is there any possibility of constructing something that would protect the vehicles, Sam's vehicles, from erosion by the weather? Or is that not necessary?
I don't say it is not necessary, but we are short of space, so we need to see where we can find some sort of a carport structure or something where we can have a shed. We haven't considered that, neither have we put that up in our CIP, but definitely we can look into that. So space is a premium here, space is a constraint.
But they have to park somewhere, right?
Yeah, but right now, since they are parked, there are so many vehicles, we are parking it at different places. While if you have a proper structure, then all have to come at one particular place to park. Otherwise, we'll have to create sheds at different places, which may not be,
No,
which
that's
may
not.
not work out, so.
How many vehicles do we have in total?
Tim, on the hand?
I want to say 9.
9?
Is that right?
9? And are they all in similar condition as the two that are now being replaced?
This would be the worst, I would think.
These are the worst of the two.
Yeah.
These have been discussed at prior board meetings, I think probably 2 years ago, maybe, something like that.
Kind of remember that, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they're any better now than they were then.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Do we have a vehicle, plan for when they become to the point where they need to be
Obsolete,
replaced? So we'd be
yeah.
thinking ahead toward our vehicle needs?
Right now, we do not have anything of that.
Okay, it'd be good to think about
Yes.
some of the, I know you're doing a lot of that kind of planning. Also, I know there was some talk about electric vehicles. I understand that doesn't really work when you don't have a spot for them and they're not available in this type of vehicle. But, will you be paying attention to like, mileage and so forth to look for the most environmentally sensitive vehicles that you could, and the most cost-effective vehicles that you can get in a category that we need?
Yeah, we did check on the electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles, and we found out that an extra 15,000 is required to be paid to convert the existing vehicles which are available, gas vehicles, to be converted to electric, because these are service vehicles or utility vehicles, so it needs to be customized. It's not like an electric vehicle or hybrid vehicle which normal passengers would use. These are specific for service requirements. And therefore it would be more expensive for us to convert something like that to hybrid or electric. We did investigate the possibility of it. But yes, we will definitely keep in mind that we get good mileage when we choose the vehicle.
So the cost of replacing the two is what? Without it being electric?
Yeah, that's what's been attached. It is about 50,
8,122 for one,
50,000 and
and in
48,000.
total 98,434.
Yep,
And how much more to go electric
15,000,
each?
yes.
But that's without a
Plus.
charging station.
Right.
You would still have to get a charging station.
Just for clarification, the vehicle that is the heavier, the F-350, which is the actual service vehicle with the service bed and the crane and everything, that's an F-350, so that one, we're not able to convert. The 250, we could convert that, but as Kishan pointed out, $15,000 for the conversion kit and another $1,500 for the install on that. Down the road, it looks like more hybrid type truck vehicles will be available, but
I've heard
in
that the
today's
Ford
market, Ford and Chevy will be coming out.
Ford 150 will come out next year with a hybrid or
150, yeah.
electric vehicle.
There's gonna be a Hummer electric this year.
Yes, that's what I was,
Tesla, Hummer,
Yeah.
there's a couple Japanese pickup.
There's that Tesla with the broken windows
That's
too.
They're coming
So
along.
they're coming, they're just not here. Yeah,
might be a little early.
And there is a Rivian electric vehicle for $58,000 that will be offered next year.
but
it's
they
too
need
late
them now.
for that.
Yeah.
They need them now, so,
So it's-
do we have a motion or
So moved.
Second?
Second,
any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on, update on emergency digester cleaning project, which we know has been a big
Yes.
factor in what you've been doing lately.
Yes, so we're now very close to cleaning the digesters. We've had a confirmation from the contractor. He's actually in California doing some work with East Bay Mud, and that is expected to complete within 2 to 3 weeks' time. So we hope to get started in the first week of March. So we've got all the contracts, insurance, bonds, everything in place, and getting ready to start in the first week of March.
So could you just speak for a minute about why this is necessary, just for the public, since we're,
You know,
what
refer to
this
Tim.
is, Tim, can you give us a little summary of what this project is?
What the digester
Digester
cleaning
cleaning.
is?
Emergency digester cleaning project.
So the
Why do we need it?
digester, usually when you do a digester cleaning, it's usually done every like 7 to 10 years, depending on how long it's been in service and the types of solids that you're running through it, the types of screenings that you have to remove things on the front end of your plant and everything. When this original plant was put into service, the headworks was one of the last things to go in. And that's kind of what we've been fighting with this digester. This digester was it was the first one that went into service when the new plant was put online, and 20 years ago, 21 years ago now. And that digester has never been cleaned. So it's gone well past what it should have been for cleaning. So we've probably lost capacity as far as digester capacity of the solids in there, because we're fairly certain that there is grit. They do get grit accumulation in the bottom of the digester, even though they're mixed, they do still get grit accumulation. So we know we have a problem with grit accumulation in it, and we also have a problem with ragging in the digester, where a lot of the mixing, not a lot of them, I would say on the recirculation line, 3 of the 4 draw lines are completely plugged with rags that we're not able to clear out.
Flushable wipes?
We won't know until we actually get into
Yes,
it,
but
but
yes.
there's a high probability. And the rags actually, they got to a point where they got into our secondary digester, and we were having a lot of problems with ragging in the recirculation pump and the heating loop pumps, to where we had to bring it's a rental pump that we have on site now that we're recirculating the digester with. It's a chopper pump, and it chops up all the rags into, basically takes those rags, makes them into small bits so that they can pass through the other areas of the digester system.
So in the past, this equipment was not cleaned as perhaps it should have been, and now we are going to start doing it properly.
In the past, what we did is we cleaned the secondary digester.
This is not a criticism of the past, I just want to
No.
say that we are now doing
Now we're,
what
yes,
is really
that is-
necessary to keep
the
this
plan
going,
is- yes.
particularly with the problem of flushable wipes.
Abso-positively, the plan is to clean this digester. As soon as this digester is clean, we are going to talk to the cleaning contractor, get on the books to go through the secondary digester and see what's going on in there to make sure everything is good to go. We have a couple of we have one chopper pump that we have to install. We have another one that's on the way. So that should also help with the rags. I mean, the more rags, like I said, the more rags you get out in the beginning, the less problems you have with your entire treatment process and equipment downstream from that.
So some of the additional problems is the flushable wipes.
Yes. Yeah, we have actually 2 digesters, digester number 1 and digester number 2. So one of the digesters was cleaned, 7 years back, I would say?
It was longer
Yeah,
than that.
7 years back. So the intent was to clean the second digester, but for some various reasons it got postponed. So now we arrived at the stage where even the one which was cleaned earlier is ready for cleaning.
Okay,
So we're going to clean one digester now, one which was not cleaned earlier, complete that, and then be ready to take up the next digester very soon.
sounds good. Do you need any action from the board on this, or is it just
No,
information?
it's just an update because it's an emergency project. I need to give an update at each board meeting.
And do we have a public relations campaign starting on flushable wipes soon?
Yes, we have NSAC, the person who had done the presentation at one of our board meetings, National Stewardship Action Council.
She made a presentation at our
At
board meeting too. Yeah.
So they're pretty active in that time.
And
They'll give us monthly updates on what's going on.
the bad news is, I just went to Costco to get some wipes for our 2-year-old granddaughter, and then saw, oh, they have a new item, flushable wipes
Yep.
at Costco, unfortunately.
It's a problem.
I might be mistaken, but I thought I saw that the bill against flushable wipes had been revived for this session.
It was revised, I could talk about that now or during the attorney's report, whatever your pleasure is.
Well, now we're talking about it, so why don't we
Okay.
hear about it
All
now?
right. I mean, basically there was a definition of what was not a flushable wipe. They were encountering a lot of resistance from the industry. And so the bill was modified. It took out the definitions, it had referred to performance standards. There was a big fight about whether those standards were right or not. They were international standards, but they weren't the industry's own standards. And then the other thing that happened, because it became a 2-year bill, is that the dates were postponed until 1 more year. So the definition of what's not a flushable wipe is out. But the part that would be enacted if and when the bill passes was changed from flushable wipes to non-woven disposable products. As it turns out, there are plastic components in all of the wipes but one. And so the intent, I think that one product is actually might be suitable. But it's only the only one that's on the market. There's some in Japan, I think there's some somewhere in Europe or maybe the Middle East. But anyway, the good news about the bill is it got out of the Assembly and into the Senate.
And what does the bill say? It says that they're not gonna be, they cannot promote them further as, yes, they can be flushed, they just can't be processed.
Right.
So,
They shall be labeled and clearly and conspicuously in adherence with labeling requirements to communicate it should not be flushed. And this label shall be in a high contrast font and color respective to the surrounding wording and space on the packaging, and shall be in a location visible when they're dispensed. So when you take one out, you'll see it. That's basically what the statute says in terms of, or the bill says, in terms of labeling.
so is there a piece of equipment that we could install that would make it possible to deal with those, like a whole chopping thing that would come up first? And how much would that cost everybody in our SAM area?
I have another client, I know you're not asking me, but I have another client that's got a small treatment plant that is putting in what is called a bar screen. That's to pick up these sort of rags, and they're spending about $3 million on it. They've got a plant that's, I think they've got 7 employees, they're about half the size here, so that's a big chunk of money.
Yeah, I mean, I think
No.
people need to realize this, that it's, you know, if this is gonna continue, we either have to stop it, or we have to.
Yeah, there's gotta be some real penalties, I think.
Or we have to, people have to agree to spend the money to add the equipment to deal with this.
Jack up the price.
It would be easier to jack up the price, because all the lift stations and the pump stations, it would require that type of equipment
At every
all
pump
the
station.
stations throughout the entire system.
So part of the bill, it might be revised to, add a surcharge, the percentage of which is gonna be used to fund this equipment and, sewage treatment plants.
Yeah, I think we need to get a foot in the door first, but we'll see,
Yeah.
so to speak. Because, it was very unusual the way this bill was handled, because there was a lot of political pressure was brought on by the industry.
That's not unusual.
Yeah, what's that? No, that part's not unusual. What was unusual is that they sort of made it into a two-year bill in a weird way that, I can't explain it the way the lobbyists for CASA could explain it.
They
But
can
it
do
was-
whatever they want. There's waivers, the joint rules,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's a bill in search of a committee in the Senate, it's the sense I got from looking at the status report. But I think it's gonna help tremendously that the National Stewardship Council is, because they have a track record of getting environmentally conscious legislation done.
Well, if
This
there's
is
anything we
clearly
can do to
that.
help that
Yes,
effort,
let us know.
I
you
think
know,
they asked us for a donation in our last board meeting for
Yeah.
Yeah.
$1,000.
Yeah, well, we had that already,
We doubled
right,
the
yeah.
donation they asked
$2,000.
for.
Right.
We asked for more than, we gave them more than they asked for,
Yeah.
because, you're talking millions of dollars of extra equipment to deal with this, so, and you're talking ongoing problems in our plant because of this, so.
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, there was a point at which letter writing was helpful in the Assembly, and that will happen in the Senate as well, and I'm sure CASA will be
Well, I'm guessing the
sending
Senate might be
notices.
more receptive to an aggressive message in the Assembly. I mean, typically that's how it goes.
Yeah,
But-
Yeah, and the problem could occur even before it reaches the lift stations or pump stations, when it leaves the resident's place. As it's going through the pipe, if there are some 45-degree elbows, it goes and gets stuck there, gets built up, and then you have a backup.
It'd be great to have some animation showing that.
Yeah.
So we could actually have that on our, website.
Yeah,
Here's what
we are in the
happens
process
when-
of preparing
Good.
doing the video.
Yeah,
We should be
that's
having
great.
it, I think we'll have it by April. We'll have it by April.
People need to see it.
Well, and I think, some of these joint lobbying
Yeah.
efforts should have stuff like that. Anyway, we all know what we think about this, so.
In the meantime,
Yeah,
we
so-
could write a letter to the review.
Yeah,
That's what I would
For
do,
Sam to write a letter.
signed by the chair. and vice chair.
Sure,
Yeah.
just to let people know, people don't realize. So,
Midcoastside mothers, maybe, something that people do. I don't know.
Great idea, Jim.
yeah.
Really good
Come on.
idea.
They're organized, they're
Yeah.
actors.
Yes. Maybe some little posters at like Ocean View Park or whatever, you know, on the restaurant.
The flush with a big X through it.
Yeah,
Or a mailing in our bills.
a mailing in the bills. Excellent.
Yeah, there's been some wild public relations efforts that were done by different council member agencies, the three Ps, you know, pee, poo, and paper, that's it. And talking toilets with the lids going
I
up
like
and
it.
down and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah,
It-
well, we're not the only ones.
No,
so
no,
it
everybody-
makes sense
this is
to
a-
not reinvent the wheel too.
It's a statewide problem, and the
It's a
more
nationwide
pumping
problem.
stations you, yeah, well, it's nationwide,
It's
yeah.
a world.
Well, they do
The,
have Global Toilet Day,
Yeah.
where they do campaigns around various sanitation issues.
I'm not sure this is the top of it, but I like to know that it exists.
It exists.
Oh, that's a good thing. All right, anything further on the emergency digester cleaning project? Okay, moving on to general manager's report.
We have the monthly manager's report. Staff is here for answering any questions if you need any clarifications.
You know, still dealing with stuff, but.
Shall we present every
seems
month?
better. Anyone have any questions on the general manager's report?
No.
Okay, moving on. Wastewater management specialist on the status of work.
We have a real short little PowerPoint.
Great. I need to move.
I have one of those.
Yes. These are the standard report.
Thank you.
These are not the diagrams, these are
Once you
diagrams.
can do, so that you can.
Have diagrams by the name.
Yeah.
Khakis.
Costco super bag.
So really quick, I had a written report in the agenda packet. If anyone has questions on that, feel free to throw them out there, but I just want to kind of go, we've been doing a second evaluation of the IPS related corrosion and odor in the second stage of that. We did one at first in the upstream, we now have looked at the downstream coming into the treatment plant. I expect that we'll receive the report from our subconsult on that in a couple of weeks and be ready to move forward with implementation of a plan this summer so that we get a better handle on odor and corrosion. The Portola pump station, it specifically came up as odorous and having when you drive by there in the morning or in the evening, you tend to pick up odors from that pump station. So we want to be able to address that. We also last week had Chuck Fenton out with me again, looking at the CIP needs for the pump stations. There's some good things to report out there. The storage at both Montero and Portola pump stations is definitely beneficial to the system and are in good shape and work well. There's some new pumps being installed at Portola. Montero pump station, the pumps seem to be in good shape. And then also the VFDs at the Portola pump station, which is variable frequency drives. A really nice installation of VFDs there. Whoever did that work did an extremely professional job. They're working very well. And they also have a de-ragging system built into the controls there that I've never seen one like this before. It automatically senses when the pumps are ragging up with these rags and is able to reverse the direction and at least remove clogging if it shows up. Doesn't get rid of the problem overall, but at least addresses it and keeps the pumps running, which is handy.
Yes, for sure.
Push the right button here. So, upcoming things, what we're gonna be doing for the next month or so is looking at the evaluation of the flow storage project. Are there alternatives, the need, And we're planning on coming back to the board at the March meeting with a recommendation on how to move forward with that, or not move forward, whatever the determination is. Still working on the collection system contract with the member agencies. We had a meeting in January, we have not had one in February. I guess I'll throw a reminder here that when I first started, I told you I'm gonna be gone twice in the next little while. Once was for my trip to Europe, and then I'm on vacation again next week. Those are the two events I had already scheduled when I started working, but after that, you'll be stuck with me, I hope. The digester cleaning and structure, we talked about. The one thing that we didn't talk about is structural evaluation. Those tanks, digesters produce, well, I describe them as giant stomachs. Basically, you're sending solids into those, and the byproduct of breaking it down is a stabilized solid, and the solid comes out as biosolids that we dewater and take to the landfill. You also get water, and you also get what we commonly refer to as sewer gas. That gas has hydrogen sulfide in it, which is extremely corrosive. Typically, they build these tanks and coat them to protect the concrete, but a 20-year-old tank, I can all but guarantee that there's not going to be coating left in the top of the tanks, and there's going to be structural damage to the concrete. So we're going to need to look at that and see, have a structural engineer take a look at it and determine exactly what or if we need to do any work to repair those and get them back in service. And then we're continuing to work on the 5-year SAM wide CIP with the pump stations and, and further plant needs. I actually realized I skipped a slide here. Let's see if I can figure it out. Back to the pump stations, I want to talk about those. Definitely some pump station needs that need attention. The Princeton pump station, the picture on the left there, he's got his foot on the top of it where it says danger, but it's a permit required confined space for these guys to get in and do even basic work, and that whole system is, honestly, it's scary. The upper right-hand picture there is 3 transformers that are sitting at ground level, where if any water gets into the building at all, you're going to have electrical issues, as in shorting out or electrocuting somebody. Pump station ventilation.
Can they be lifted up?
Those could possibly be lifted up, yes, and they probably should be. It's even in the interim, it'd be a good idea to get those off the floor. That's a good point, Barbara. Thank you. Basically, the bottom line is all the pump stations need some investment. Princeton, honestly, needs to be replaced. I found a report in 1998. It was recommended that we replace that pump station. So 22 years ago, basically. I think it's provided a good life, but a nice submersible pump station where you have a hole in the ground that the water comes into, and you lower pumps down into it, and when you need to work on them, you pull the pumps out, and people don't need to go down into anything. It's the industry standard now. It's a relatively inexpensive way to build pump stations, and it's very reliable. And then the last thing is just general housekeeping. I'm suggesting that next summer we look at getting a couple of part-time, summer college type kids or something like that to help us just clean things up and organize and get stuff in better condition. And then the last thing we're on there at the very bottom, kind of get hid by the pictures, is still working on the collection contract and the budget. So the budget stuff is coming up, and we're working hard to have that in place in time for the new fiscal year. And with that, any questions?
I have not seen this in our package. Could I have a copy of this presentation? That
We will put it on the website, and you can get to it.
I can email it to all of you.
Or you can email
Okay,
it.
thank you.
That'd be great.
Perfect. You want it emailed to you? Okay, we can do that. And then just in case you want to feel sorry for me, this is what I dealt with last week when I came here, is just getting to the airport and then sitting on the runway for an hour and a half while they got us out of the airport was quite an event when I was visiting my children in Utah, so. And that's under the covered part. It was even worse. That's what blew in. Thank you very much, and that's the end of the report.
We have to be aware that major weather events could happen here.
Yep.
I hope something happens soon.
Yes. Yes, means rain. For sure.
Thank you very much.
Arrange-
No action needed, right?
No action needed,
Okay.
just receive a report.
Attorney's report?
Well, I said I was gonna talk about some two-year bills. When I said that, I was anticipating that my office would have done, the annual update that we do, which hasn't happened. I've already talked about AB 1672. I'd like to talk about two other bills real briefly. Both of these, were carried by, I guess it's Assemblyman Grayson out of, wait a minute.
Modesto?
That's not right. No, 1483 and 1484. 1483, I gotta get the right bills in front of me, sorry about that. It is Grayson. So 1483 actually passed, and this is the one that says you have to, a city, county, or special district that has an internet website shall make all the following available: current schedule of fees, reports for the last 5 years, that sort of thing. The language was very sloppy, and for example, a special district, under the literal language of the statute, would have to put a series of, would have to put fees up that the city or county that they serve was provided. So I've been working with, well, I haven't recently, but I've been working with the CASA state legislative committee to do a cleanup legislation. It would be part of, it's contemplated that would be part of the omnibus, an omnibus act, which are not by definition non-controversial. But the actual two-year bill that I wanted to talk a little bit about is AB 1484. That got held up and didn't make it through. But one of the things that they're taking aim at fees imposed on development projects, in particular housing. This is the legislature trying to, every which way, to find some way to do something about the housing crisis. And there was a report that came out, I think, last summer from the Department of Housing and Community Development that talked a lot about fees, and the focus was on impact fees that land use agencies charge and actually do impose on residential developments as a condition of development. Special districts, and I mean, Sam doesn't do this, but special districts like Montera and Granada charge connection, what we customarily call connection fees. They're actually there's a statutory definition of something called a capacity charge that really gets at mostly what we're dealing with, but they're subject to the same standards. What this bill is contemplated doing is trying to tighten up the nexus requirements, but in doing so, it does it in a way that would make it virtually impossible for a special district to have it, because special districts don't charge based upon housing, a particular housing development. They set a connection fee or a capacity charge based upon the universe of new connections and what the facilities are that only be needed to serve them. So there's no way to do it. It's like an apples and oranges type of calculation. The other thing that the
Wait, I don't
legislature,
understand.
pardon me?
I'm sorry, I didn't get
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
So, we charge a fee for new projects to connect to the system.
Right, but it's not.
This legislation would change that how?
It potentially would change. I mean, it hasn't gone. It's.
It would do what?
The way it would change it is it would require each district to focus on each housing development rather than doing the normal way you calculate a fee is on a group of connections that you would anticipate happening over a period of time. And you figure out how many units would connect, you figure out what the demand is, the engineers figure out what kind of facilities are required, and then you set a fee so that you have the money to pay for that. And if you were required instead to try to calculate it to focus on this development or that development.
With that individual house?
Well,
So
it
a lot
could
of
be
our-
individual
a lot of
house,
our
but they're
development
talking
is
about
individual.
individuals,
It's
they're
just a
talking
flat
about
fee.
developments. I mean, this is probably less of an issue here than a lot of other places where there's a little more rapid development taking place. But so the other thing that is part of, that this legislation is taking aim at is the idea of charging what's customarily called a buy-in. That's where facilities are oversized, so there's room for new development to come in. And the author has indicated he would like to stop that from happening, prohibit that sort of a charge. When you have a situation where there's a district that's pretty much built out, that's all the charges are gonna be. There's nothing new being built, there's just extra capacity that needs to be paid for. So it's troublesome for special districts that are in a position where they're gonna have new connections
Yeah.
for obvious reasons. So, I mean, that's another
All
two-year
right,
bill
thank
that's of great concern. Less so to Sam and certainly to the city and especially to, I think, the two districts. There's a couple, I just wanted to highlight those bills.
And the good news was,
The good news is it didn't pass.
Can you
Pass, yeah.
email the information you have on that?
Sure.
To me?
Yeah, yeah, I'll send
All of us
it, I'll
are.
send it, yeah, if I send it to one of you, I'll send it
we need
to
to bring
all.
it up at our next meeting, so.
Yeah, that'd
Yeah,
be great.
okay.
Thanks.
All right, we'll do that.
Anything else? Director's reports?
Well, I just wanna say I attended the, Assembly Select Committee on the Sea Level Rise in the California Economy. That was a panel discussion Friday afternoon in, Foster City. So it's a select committee of the Assembly, and they're having 3 meetings. They had one in December in, Encinitas, one in Foster City last week, and then they're having another one in Sacramento in April. And the whole point of it is to take testimony about, what local government's needs are in terms of, preparing for sea level rise in particular, but more broadly, climate change. And there were some excellent, technical presentations. This, Professor Hill from Berkeley, I sent you guys something about her presentation on groundwater before, associated with the group charge. Very compelling about how actually rising groundwater is gonna be a problem first before sea level rise, because rising seas put pressure on the subsurface freshwater gradient, and groundwater starts rising. And it's especially a problem for some of the communities that already have levees, because, the seawater actually percolates under the levees, and then you have problems behind the levees. And so a lot of the cities were not aware of this issue, and it affects infiltration and inflow and sewage systems.
Yeah.
We have our electrical subsystem that's, underground out here. So it was actually, quite enlightening for a lot of jurisdictions about, well, we gotta probably first deal with rising groundwater, not just sea level rise. And of course, that's very expensive because you have to move infrastructure, right, or insulate it or do something. So that was pretty interesting, but the whole purpose of this conference is to generate information that will be bundled into legislation during this current 2020 session. The deadline of which for introducing bills is February 21. So there's a lot going on in Sacramento right now, and there's going to be a fairly large portfolio of bills dealing with sea level rise. And also there's gonna be climate resilience bonds to the tune of anywhere from between $5 and $10 billion. Start, getting money out to local communities to start, adaptation planning and all that stuff. So it was pretty interesting, and it was well attended. Senator Hill was there, Assemblymember Bowman, Assembly Speaker Pro Tem Kevin Mullen. So there was a lot of important listening going on, and a sense of urgency that it's time to act, right? These projects, these major infrastructure projects take 20, 30 years. That's like, the money's gotta be spent now. So that was kind of the message. So that's just my little report.
Yeah, anything that you have that seems like it would be of interest to all of us. I hope that if she sends it to you, maybe you just send it out to us.
Yes, so I think there's probably some stuff that's gonna be posted on the select committee website this week that I might be able to forward to you. I think we need to pay attention to, the resilience bonds that are coming forward. There's a Senate one right now, SB 45, that's about 5.5 billion. The governor's proposed 4.75 billion, but there's thinking now that we have to go as high as 10 or 12 billion. And we have to make sure that we review the language and make sure things that we're interested in as a sewer agency, you know, are
Right.
covered. So there's gonna be a lot of money shoveled at, you know, I mean, natural systems restoration, but a lot of the money is gonna be for infrastructure. So we just wanna make sure we're tracking what's going on, and if there are things we think are missing, then we wanna, you know, get our message out there. So, and the next bond that's gonna appear in the next week is going to be the assembly version of the Senate bond. And I don't have a number for that bill yet, so there's a lot going on.
Anything you'd share would be great. Yes. Rick?
I just turned off my phone calendar, but David Pines, our supervisor's got a meeting coming up here in San Mateo.
Good point.
Yes,
I don't have the date because I just turned my calendar off.
It's
yeah.
the
my
shortest
calendar,
shore.
Short of short.
It should be good,
I'm
yeah.
signed up for that. So
Yeah,
it's an all-morning session kind of
Yeah.
thing.
I don't know, did you receive that, Keisha, a notice of that conference?
The College of San Mateo, I think.
I'll send that along to you.
Okay.
It might be that some staff should go. Maybe even Dan. It's free,
I'll get the date here in a second, so go ahead.
okay.
I think it's on
That'd be
April
great.
1st. I remember having seen something and I thought,
Yeah, I think it's good, we need to be thinking about these things. And it's, you're an enormous resource for us. Thank you. Anything further on director's reports? Topics for future board consideration?
I think we might, have a closed session on the issue of the wet weather flow. I don't know if we can have a closed session about that, but I'm thinking that there might be issues of financing that and the bid documents and all
we're
this.
planning on bringing it to the March 9th board meeting.
Okay,
So right now, we're doing an analysis of determining how we should proceed, whether we go ahead with the project or not, and doing
okay.
a couple of analysis, so we're not yet ready for that. So
I'll put my thinking cap on
Okay.
about closed sessions, designations.
Anything else? The next meeting? Do we wanna talk about that? The fact that I will
Yeah.
not be able to attend the next meeting, nor will Catherine Slater Carter.
Ooh.
Correct, so we do not have anything urgent as of now, so there might be a possibility that we might cancel the meeting on
Okay.
February 24th unless something urgent comes up.
Okay.
Otherwise, we'll cancel the February 24th and have a meeting have the next meeting on March 9th.
Okay,
That's not doing that now, I guess you do that different, separately, but I thought it might be worth mentioning. Okay, guess we move on to closed session?
Yes.
Right, so we should probably take a break and let Steve wrap this,
Steve
stuff
Rabbit's camera and stuff.
packed up.